For Earth, there is only one sun. It rises every morning whether we notice it or not. It warms our skin, casts shadows behind us, pulls plants out of the ground, and holds our entire world together with invisible threads of gravity. There is no debate about the sun, no competing theories, no doctrines, no denominations. It simply exists, steady, constant, undeniable. But God doesn't work that way. Across all of human history, people have worshipped more than 10,000 documented gods, and probably tens of thousands more whose names were erased by time. Every culture, every tribe, every civilization created its own version of the divine. There were sky gods, storm gods, river spirits, fertility gods, underworld guides, firebringers, ancestors, mythic heroes, guardians of mountains, protectors of the harvest. As humanity changed, so did its gods, shifting like our shadows as we tried to understand the world around us. The earliest humans worshipped fire, ice, the sun itself. Later, as society grew more complicated, the gods grew more complicated with it. And yet, for all of this, for the thousands of deities worshipped with absolute certainty, there is very little evidence that any of these gods existed in a literal, physical sense. But lack of evidence doesn't mean God isn't real. It just means God might not be what we expected. Maybe he's there, just not in the forms we shaped. Maybe he's watching, but chooses not to intervene. Maybe he has a purpose for silence that we don't understand. Or maybe there is no purpose at all. And that's the part that scares me. No matter how hard people try to convince us that God is obvious, or clear, or speaking, the truth is simpler. God is silent. Even with all who claim they have heard him, it seems there is no credible evidence that God has ever broken the silence. And silence is a tough companion. Humans don't do well with silence. We don't do well with mystery. We don't do well with the unknown. When God doesn't speak, we rush in to speak for him. When life doesn't give us answers, we invent them. When reality feels too empty, we fill it with meaning, with stories, with explanations that make the silence feel less frightening. I've started to realize something about myself, and about all of us. We don't just seek God because we're spiritual. We seek God because we're terrified of the nothingness. Think about it. If God never spoke, never acted, never revealed himself in any way, then all we would have is silence, a blank universe, an empty sky, no guidance, no purpose. No cosmic safety net, just existence, floating inside existence with no deeper reason behind it. And most of us can't handle that. So we create meaning, we build stories, we add layers, and that's not me attacking religion. That's me understanding people. Religion, all religion, exists because humans can't survive the emotional weight of nothing. It's too heavy, too final, too empty. We need something to hold on to, something to give shape to the chaos of life. Something to absorb our fears, our hopes, our tragedies, our dreams. If God himself is silent, then we paint over the silence with whatever we need him to be. When someone needs comfort, God becomes comforting. When someone needs justice, God becomes a judge. When someone needs discipline, God becomes strict. When someone needs forgiveness, God becomes gentle. We don't intentionally distort him. We just fill in the blank space with our own emotional needs, because silence is unbearable. But here's the strange thing I discovered. When I stripped away the traditions, the doctrines, the rules, the expectations, I didn't find clarity underneath. I found more silence, and I didn't know what to do with it. Religion often works as insulation. It softens the blow of the unknown. It gives shape to what would otherwise be shapeless. It offers answers, even when those answers come from people, not from God himself. And that's where this gets personal, because the more I went looking for God, the more I realized how much of God was built by people who were just as confused, just as scared, just as human as the rest of us. People who didn't hear God either, but couldn't live with the silence. people who needed God to be something, so they shaped him into something. Not because they were manipulative or deceptive, but because they were trying to survive the silence too. But let's go deeper, not into religion, but into us. Humans don't just fear nothingness. We fear meaninglessness. We fear the idea that our lives might not add up to anything. We fear that when we die, the world forgets us in 6 days. We fear that history will never remember our names. We fear being small. We fear that we will become part of the silence. Even if we don't live forever, most of us, if we're honest, want our name to live on long after we're gone. People find comfort in that, and I get it. I remember being a young boy riding my bike on a dirt path, looking behind me and seeing my own tire marks in the dirt. It gave me comfort to see the impression I left in the dust. Even though it would disappear with the first breeze, it felt empowering. It felt like proof that I was here. That fear of disappearing without a trace is ancient. It's baked into our bones. We want our stories to matter. We want to be part of something bigger. We want to leave a mark so we know we were here. And if God doesn't speak, if God doesn't guide, if God doesn't reveal himself, then we cling to any story that makes us feel less alone in the universe. Because the alternative, the possibility that there's no plan, no purpose, no voice behind the curtain, is too overwhelming. That's why humans fill the void of God, not because we're weak, but because we're wired for meaning. If we didn't fill that void, there would be nothing. No doctrines, no churches, no scriptures, no myths, no rituals, no prayers. Just emptiness, a giant cosmic shrug, and deep down, most of us can't accept that. We aren't built to carry nothing in our souls. We need something, even if it's something we created. And I'm not immune to that either. I'm human. I understand the same needs, the same desire to be remembered, the sense to feel important to the world after I die. I thought if I heard God's voice, I would feel important, and there have been many moments in my life where I thought I heard God speaking to me, where I thought I felt something divine. But looking back, I can't help but wonder how desperately I needed the silence to mean something, how driven I was to have God speak to me, how much value I placed on hearing his voice. I even see the irony now. The same silence that suggested there was no God, I tried to turn into a message from God, and honestly, I think that sums up religion for a lot of us. That realization startled me. How easily the human mind can stretch coincidence into purpose. How quickly we can transform our own thoughts into God's voice. How naturally we reshape silence into answers we want to hear. And once you notice it, even once, you start questioning everything. Not because God isn't real, not because faith is foolish, but because you realize how much of what we call God is filtered through human fear, human hope, and human imagination. So where does that leave me? Somewhere between belief and uncertainty, somewhere between hope and doubt, somewhere between wanting God to be real and wondering whether we've been talking to ourselves in his name. But here's the truth I keep circling back to. If God is real, I want him without the layers we added, without the assumptions, without the stories we inherited, without the insulation that protects us from the silence, but also keeps us from ever hearing what might actually be there. So maybe the next step is acceptance. Acceptance of the silence. Acceptance of what that silence means. If there's one lesson I've learned from this search, it's that the only way to grow is to face things head-on. Maybe I can face this silence and work through the fears. Maybe I can come out the other side a stronger, more open person. Open to what we actually have in this life. Alone, but with each other. Maybe I can learn to live my life without needing a higher power to hold my hand through it. Maybe I can work through the dark side of my fears. The dark side of God isn't cruelty. It isn't anger. It isn't punishment. The dark side of God is silence, and the silence forces us to confront the possibility that we are alone. That meaning is something we invent. That purpose is something we create. That the universe doesn't owe us clarity. Maybe we owe that to ourselves. Silence is terrifying because silence is where all our fears live. Silence is where the doubt grows. Silence is where we face the possibility that the voice we've been waiting for might never come. But maybe that's why humans cling so tightly to belief, because the idea that we come from nothing, return to nothing, and are surrounded by nothing, that idea breaks us. It presses too hard against the soul. It shakes something ancient inside us, the same fears that have rattled every generation before us. Someone might argue that we are wired this way because God wanted it that way. But to me, that's a perfect example of creating meaning because there isn't any. Yes, we need answers. We need comfort. We need the sense that our life fits into something bigger than just time and biology. And when God doesn't answer, we can't seem to help ourselves but answer for Him. Not because we're delusional, not because we're naive, but because the human heart doesn't know what to do with emptiness. And if God is real, I think He understands that about us. I think He knows the silence is too much. I think He knows why we fill it. I don't know what God is. I don't know what He wants. I don't know if the silence means something or nothing, but I do know this. I'm still searching. I'm still listening. I'm still trying to peel back the layers we've added to Him, even if all I find underneath is more silence. And maybe that's the real dark side of God. Maybe the dark side of God has nothing to do with God at all. Maybe it's our fear of what that silence might mean, that God might never have been there at all. And now it's time for an ending prayer. God, not the one we crafted out of fear, not the one we weaponized, not the shadow we blamed for everything we didn't understand, but the one beneath all that. Teach us to stop using You as a scapegoat, a mirror for our violence, a name stamped on our excuses. Strip away the God we built to manipulate ourselves, the one we invoked to justify hate, to control others, to outsource our shame. If You are here, real, living, unborrowed from human ego, then help us see You without the masks we forced on You. And if there is something true, something beautiful in You, let it reach us once we finally stop telling You who You are. Amen. If you've been finding something meaningful in these explorations as I try to understand God, you can like and subscribe if you want to keep walking this road with me. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you.